300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on JJ Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on this Wednesday morning. I know I didn't have a show on Monday, but we're back and we are better than ever. We have a great guest coming up at 8:40 a.m. today. The founder and the CEO of the LA Football Network, also host of the LA Football Show, Ryan Dyrud, is going to be joining me to preview the Super Bowl, to talk about the Rams' success, even some USC football with Lincoln Riley, what those expectations of the Trojans are going to be like come the fall. But I have to start with the NBA. And it's not just some of the games from last night, which I'll touch on, but we are fast approaching the free agency deadline. It is going to, I think, conclude at 3 p.m. on Thursday, and a lot of activity has already been in the works, has already been in the mix. And yesterday we had a number of blockbuster trades, but I have to start with the Indiana Pacers and the Sacramento Kings, 2 franchises that haven't necessarily been in the news for the best of reasons as of yesterday. And these 2 teams completed a blockbuster trade. So the Sacramento Kings have traded their promising second-year guard, Tyrese Halliburton, who they took 12th overall in the 2020 NBA draft, to the Indiana Pacers for Domantas Sabonis, the 2-time All-Star. Now, the official haul that the Sacramento Kings are going to be getting from the Indiana Pacers is Domantas Sabonis, Jeremy Lamb, Justin Holiday, and a 2023 second-round pick. The Pacers are fully receiving Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield, and Tristan Thompson. So a 7-player trade in the mix. And let me first say, because Domantas Sabonis, this is a 2-time All-Star. This is a guy who's been averaging this season 19 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists. This is just his 6th season in the league. I think people still forget how young Domantas Sabonis is, probably because they get clouded by his dad, Arvydas Sabonis, the 7 years that he played in the NBA. And he was also a beast in the NBA during those 7 seasons. A couple times averaged 16 points, 14 points per game. For his career, he averaged 12, 7, and like a couple assists. So he was a really good player, Arvydas Sabonis, but not on the same level as his son, Domantas Sabonis. Let me first say this. I think that this is a really good trade for both teams. Now, when I say a really good trade, I'm not suggesting that this is necessarily going to lead to championships for either of these organizations and either of these franchises, but I do think that it's important to kind of revitalize a fan base. And here's why I really like this trade for both teams. I think that both teams kind of won this trade, but if I had to look at one organization and say which one got a lot better than the other, to me, it's the Sacramento Kings. Because I have always been extremely bullish about Domantas Sabonis. I've been preaching his name for the last 3-4 years, ever since he's stayed at OKC and really got some runway, people kind of forget that the way that he landed in Indiana was because OKC traded for Paul George. And that was part of the way that they ended up sending Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis over to Indiana. And that's what really kind of allowed Sabonis to flourish a bit more. And this is a guy who's got such finesse around the rim. He's an above average defender. You wouldn't think he is, but he is so deft around the rim. He's got touch with both hands. He can hit the mid-range. He can dribble the ball. He can put the ball on the floor. I think he's competed in the NBA Skills Challenge competitions at the All-Star games plenty of times. This is a really versatile, really talented player. And the thing about it is, I think, first of all, he should have been an All-Star for perhaps the last 3 seasons. Obviously, he has been the last 2 seasons. But I also think this is an opportunity for the Sacramento Kings to see more clearly who they have in De'Aaron Fox. Because that's really the question here. That's really the purpose behind this trade is, what do we have in De'Aaron Fox? I know he's having a down year, but his down year in comparison to last year is still 21 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. Now, the shooting hasn't quite been the same. 45% from the floor, 26% from 3. That is quite abysmal for a guy of his standards. But I still like De'Aaron Fox, and I think that if you're the Sacramento Kings, you've invested so much money in De'Aaron Fox that to not try to pair him with some established all-star and not just a bunch of projects has to be valued, has to be your top priority. And that's why I understand this move, because as much as I really like Tyrese Halliburton, and boy, has he come on late over the last 2.5 months, really this entire season, he's been fantastic. 14 points, 7 assists, 41% from the three-point line for Halliburton. In fact, he's the only King that he has started the most games for the Kings this year, 51 games played, 34 minutes. So I see the promise in Tyrese Halliburton, but at the same time, they've had 3 guys that play the same position. De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Halliburton, and Davion Mitchell. Those are 3 guys that in essence are serving the same purpose. And I think that right now, you can't move forward and allow each one of these guys individually to excel when they're all on the same team. And so you look at Halliburton, you look at Mitchell, both those two guys made the Rising Stars game. So you can see the promise from both of them. But I just think that for me, you can't put the fan base through several more years of turmoil, several more years of incompetency, several more years of not really a competitive roster. This is still a Kings team that's been struggling to even make the play-in tournament. They can't seem to make the play-in tournament. And to be honest, I really love Davion Mitchell. I know he was the Summer League MVP. The guy's been still averaging 10 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists. He's a defensive stopper. But now you allow De'Aaron Fox to kind of slide into his more natural combo guard position at the 1. Davion Mitchell could start alongside him. He only gets about 25 minutes per game. And I think that the two of them can actually flourish together. And now you've got Sabonis in the mix. And again, I'm not saying that they're going to win a championship, but at least you see what you have with multiple kind of above average players. De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis. And now you give Davion Mitchell more runway. The reason why I don't think it was outlandish to make this move if you're the Kings is because we've seen certain guys within their first year, within their first 2 years, take off and look like all-stars. We saw Doncic do it. We've seen LaMelo Ball do it. So It's not to suggest that Tyrese Halliburton isn't going to have a fantastic NBA career, because I do think he is, but I think that had he been showing he's averaging 20 points per game, he's playing at an all-star level, well, maybe the Kings don't make this trade. And that's why I also think this benefits the Indiana Pacers, because they also kind of had a log jam with Turner and Sabonis both kind of clogging up the middle, serving similar, different, but in many ways very similar purposes. And now perhaps with Tyrese Halliburton, if you provide a fresh opportunity for him in a new environment where he's not in essence held in captivity and given a chance to succeed and really thrive and flourish, well, maybe he can. Maybe he just can. And the Indiana Pacers have always been a vexing team for me, because when you look on paper, they've always had a lot of really talented B-plus guys, a really deep roster. But then they obviously just shipped Karis LeVert, and Malcolm Brogdon's been out. TJ Warren has been missing time. He's been out indefinitely. But it's a very good roster, but I don't think that they necessarily ever had that singular guy. Now, Chris Duarte, who they drafted, I think is fantastic, and perhaps he and Tyrese Halliburton can be that new kind of starting backcourt for Coach Rick Carlisle, and they can kind of go off together, which I think would be an interesting pairing. But for the Indiana Pacers, I think they also had to make a move, because, again, they were kind of just treading water, even with Sabonis. They really weren't going anywhere, and I just think that something had to be done. And for the Kings, obviously, when it comes to their ownership, their front office group, Vivek Ranadive, he's not a patient owner. He's not a patient owner, or Ranadive, pardon. He's not a patient owner. We saw Vlade Divac used to be the GM. Now he's out of there because they didn't reach the postseason. Luke Walton got fired midway through the year. So this has kind of been a dumpster fire. They needed to change things up. And the Pacers, again, I think that they're obviously banking on Halliburton and Duarte to erupt. The only difference is I'm not sure if they have that go-to guy, if they've got that individual player that can make the difference. But you had to find out. You had to find out, and I think that this was the only way. And I truly am intrigued by who they can be, and perhaps, and so I really don't think this was a bad trade for either side. I think the Kings edged out because they got the more established, the more proven player. But I think that Halliburton can still thrive with the Pacers. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do over there. So there was another trade that took place yesterday. It kind of, I don't want to say shocked the NBA, because I don't think it did, but CJ McCollum is no longer a Portland Trailblazer. He was traded to the New Orleans Pelicans yesterday. This kind of broke some headlines. Obviously, we saw, now he went to New Orleans with Larry Nance Jr. We saw that Norman Powell and Robert Covington had been sent to the LA Clippers earlier in the week. So we were starting to see this overhaul be put in motion before CJ McCollum was officially traded. And now it's reported that they are in talks, they being the Portland Trailblazers, are in talks of trying to trade for Jeremy Grant, right? So let me say this. I appreciate what the Portland Trailblazers are attempting to do. I admire what they're trying to do. I commend the fact that they finally came to the realization that he and Damian Lillard, it's not that they can't coexist, because they can, but there is an inherent ceiling and a limit on how far this team can go with the two of them. And obviously, if you have to prioritize one over the other, as much money as you pay Damian Lillard, it's more important to value and prioritize him than CJ McCollum. So it's really hard to self-evaluate and to look yourself in the mirror and acknowledge that change was needed. And the Trailblazers finally came to that cathartic moment for them. And I admire that. Here's what frightens me. What frightens me is when the next report that I hear after you trade CJ McCollum is that you're in talks for Jeremy Grant, then what that further shows me, what that highlights to all of us, is that the Blazers organization still doesn't get it. They're still missing the boat. They're still off the mark. Because as much as I like Jeremy Grant as a talent, is he really going to make that much more of a difference playing alongside Damian Lillard, acting as the 2, if not the 3? Is that really going to change dramatically how far this team can go? I understand it improves their defense. He's not as skilled individually as an offensive player and as an offensive package, but he can do a lot of things creatively, offensively. He's a great defensive player. That's what earned him that big contract to go play for the Detroit Pistons. But all they're doing is essentially delaying the inevitable. It's essentially going to be Groundhog Day, and perhaps instead of a first round, at best, second round appearance, it's still an early playoff exit. We know what's coming down the road. We just know. Even Damian Lillard posted an appreciation post for CJ McCollum on Instagram today saying, we knew this day would come. Of course he did. Of course he did. Now, again, I understand that we live in this kind of fanciful reality sometimes. And for the Portland Trailblazers, they thought that by trading CJ McCollum, it would create enough cap space to sign Jeremy Grant, to potentially sign another big-time free agent in the offseason, because when they traded CJ McCollum, it granted them about $20 million. It granted them about a $20 million exception. So in theory, hypothetically, they might be able to woo a big-time free agent to Portland in the offseason. But let's be honest, when's the last time that happened? I think you have to go back to Scottie Pippen being traded to the Portland Trailblazers, or really not even being traded, but signing with them after his failed marriage with the Chicago Bulls. Otherwise, the next great players with the Portland Trailblazers, LaMarcus Aldridge, Brandon Roy, Greg Oden, these guys were drafted by the team. Damian Lillard, they were drafted by the team. They weren't traded. So I just don't really think so what I find a bit faulty with this approach is I like the fact that they're prioritizing Damian Lillard, and I think the fact that they're moving off CJ McCollum to focus and to try and build around Damian Lillard is the right strategy. But then when you come around and you turn around right after you trade CJ McCollum and you say you're going after Jeremy Grant, you just haven't learned from those previous mistakes, from that previous regime. That's the problem for me. And if you're Damian Lillard, this was just a complete wash. The season was a complete wash. I don't know if he's going to be coming back at all this year. I'm not sure he wants to. I've said Damian Lillard should request out. He should start anew. And if he wanted to give the organization a chance after trading CJ McCollum, that's one thing. That's fine. But if you're Damian Lillard and you hear that the guy who they're targeting to replace CJ McCollum, Norman Powell, Robert Covington, Larry Nance Jr. is Jeremy Grant, and crossing and two crossed fingers that in the offseason you can sign a big-time free agent, I don't know if I'd have the most trust, the complete trust in the organization to get that job done. Because I've seen that they haven't. So, again, I understand that chemistry is important, hugely important. We're seeing it with the Nets and the Lakers. Believe me, as a Lakers fan, what are you without chemistry? We can see what they are without chemistry. Those two teams have been elucidating the importance of chemistry, of cohesiveness. But at the same time, I think there needs to be a baseline amount of talent for you to be able to compete for an NBA title, to contend for an NBA title. And I just don't think those two guys alone can't do it. I really don't think you can. I mean, even with the Milwaukee Bucks, when they traded for Jrue Holiday last season, in the offseason, they obviously had Giannis. Okay, Damian Lillard, fair. Who's the comp for Chris Middleton? Are you saying it's Jeremy Grant? If you are, I think you are grossly undervaluing Chris Middleton. But let's say you think that Jeremy Grant and Chris Middleton are the same guy. Well, then who's the comp for Jrue Holiday? Now, that's the problem. That's the problem right there. So I feel awful for Chauncey Billups because I hate this for him. I'd like for him to get a chance to succeed as a head coach. I think he can be a winning head coach. But at the same time, I don't love the direction that the franchise is attempting to go in at the moment. I just don't. And on the flip side, if you're the New Orleans Pelicans, certainly interesting, create some more buzz in New Orleans. You're pairing Zion with CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram. That certainly makes them a much more formidable trio. However, all three of those guys do need the ball to be effective. And again, they're kind of hovering around that 10th spot in the Western Conference. So this could give him a chance to be a little bit better in the postseason, but we haven't seen Zion at all this whole year. I don't know if he's going to be playing at all this year. So I do have some question marks, again, around the ceiling of the Pelicans. Not a bad trade for them. Not a bad trade for them whatsoever. Try to show Zion Williamson that you're doing all that you can as a franchise to surround him with talent, but the next piece of it is you need him to be playing. You need him to be playing, and right now he hasn't been playing. And that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem. So I'll kind of leave that alone for the moment. Finally, really quickly before I bring on my guest, co-founder and CEO of the LA Football Network, Ryan Dyrud, is going to be joining me in just a couple minutes. Final topic in the NBA, the Washington Wizards star guard Bradley Beal is officially done for the season. He's going to be undergoing surgery to repair his left wrist. He suffered a left wrist injury on January 29th in a loss to the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, right now, the Washington Wizards are struggling in the Eastern Conference, 12th in the Eastern Conference. They're 24-29 overall. This obviously nixes any Ben Simmons for Bradley Beal type of trade because 76ers want guys who can play right now. That's why you're starting to hear talks heating up between them and the Brooklyn Nets for James Harden. And apparently there's actually they've been gaining some traction. But here's the thing about Bradley Beal and the Washington Wizards. And I understand that Bradley Beal's been having, again, relative to his standards, a down year. 23 points, 6 assists, 6.5 assists. I'll give him a roundup, 5 rebounds per game. He's shooting 45% from the floor. That's not bad, but a career low 30% from the 3-point line. for a guy who is a three-time All-Star. He's ranked second in the NBA, scoring the last 2 years. But I've kind of grouped Bradley Beal and Damian Lillard in the same boat in this regard. Not from a talent perspective, but from the perspective of they are defiantly and sometimes appearing illogically loyal to their franchises. We've seen both of those two guys, but for the purposes of this topic, specifically Bradley Beal, remain extremely loyal to the Washington Wizards. And why? I don't know. He has some type of affection for the organization, for the city of the District of Columbia. And unfortunately, the season has ended the same way for both of those two teams, both of those two players, rather. Normally first-round exits, if not missing the playoffs altogether. And I really like Bradley Beal, and I'm not an overly religious or an overly devout person. But I do think that divine intervention has a mysterious way of presenting itself and sometimes knocking you on the shoulder. And I'm not trying to suggest that people don't have autonomy or freedom of choice to make their own decisions, but sometimes there is a higher being trying to show you the light and steer you in a different direction. And I think in this instance, that's what they're doing with Bradley Beal, saying, listen, man, we're capping you off this year. Your season's done. Maybe look at greener pastures next year. That's really what's going on. And maybe it's kind of serving as an omen this year for him to think about a different direction moving forward. So again, I just think the organization is kind of in a state of disillusion and misdirection. Apparently Spencer Dinwiddie hasn't been panning out. Kyle Kuzma's still been playing well, but how far can this team really go? I don't really know. It's a shame he's got to be done for the year, but that's how it goes. Okay. So it's my pleasure to bring onto the guest, the founder and the CEO of the LA Football Network. He hosts the LA Football Show with Frosty Rucker, the former USC Trojan, 13-year NFL veteran. He's doing great stuff. And he is currently, I'm catching him at a very, very difficult time. The man is actually driving right now to go on to a bunch of other radio shows. So I appreciate him stopping by. It's my pleasure to bring on Ryan Dyrud. Ryan, good morning. How are you?
Jonah, my man, what's up? I'm so sorry. I'm not in studio or anything. We're heading to Radio Row right now. But I'm happy you invited me on. So thank you.
Oh, it's no problem. It's no problem. Appreciate you're looking good. The beard is in full effect. It is robust. I think this is a lot fuller than the last time I saw you.
It's the playoff beard. I said once the Rams made the playoffs, I wasn't shaving until either they lost or won the Super Bowl. So here we are. It's still going strong.
It looks good. It looks good. So let me ask you, because I know a lot of people that want to hear your thoughts on this matchup. But I want to start with the Rams. You've been following them the whole year. And by the way, for those of you that haven't been following Ryan, he covers the Rams, the Chargers, USC, UCLA football, literally all LA football. But let's start with the Rams, Ryan. Obviously, we all know that when they traded for Matthew Stafford, it was for the sole purpose of returning to this game, returning to this Super Bowl. And I think that to some degree, the fact that the Rams are back in the Super Bowl validates, again, to some degree, trading for Matthew Stafford. But Jared Goff, again, did lead them to this game several years ago. No one's questioning the talent between Stafford and Goff. I don't think there's really a question there. But in your mind, do you see any scenario in which, if the Rams were to lose on Sunday, where Matthew Stafford and that trade is still validated? Like, can there be a scenario in your mind where if Matthew Stafford balls out, he plays extremely well, but maybe just Joe Burrow leads the Bengals on some incredible last-minute drive and the Rams were to lose, would it still validate in your mind making that trade, or is it as simple as, yes, if they win, it's validated, no, if they lose, it isn't?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jonah, and it probably depends who you ask, and especially if you're talking to a fan or talking to media or whatnot. But I'm always a glass half full guy, but I also had tempered expectations because, you trade. Obviously, we know you get the 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick and Jared Goff first staffer, so you give a lot. But it's in your first year. There's going to be some growing pains there. There's going to be some acclimation to getting not just Stafford and McVey on the same page, but with the receivers, with the running backs, with the offensive line. The cadence is different. The how you do stuff in the huddle is different. So for everyone that thought as soon as the trade was done, it was Super Bowl or bust, I get that. But for me, validation was getting to the NFC Championship game. That was for me. That was one step further than when they were last year. It was, you could look at statistically what Stafford did against Goff versus Goff last year, doubling his TD total, throwing for nearly 5,000 yards, third in the entire NFL. So to me, it's already been validated.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I
don't think a lot of fans in the NFC Championship game. They got there, they won. Now they're in this game. The rest is cherry on top. Because I was always in the thought that year 2 was the year that it was okay. Now that's the true year that to make this trade seem worth it, they have to win a Super Bowl in year 2. If they do it in year 1, in my opinion, they're ahead of schedule. Because how often do you make a big blockbuster trade and have it pan out in just one season? So I think they've done it so far. But I'm excited to see this game and excited to see how he can validate it, hopefully even further.
And when you think about legacy, obviously legacy is always something that is going to be discussed. And when I look at Sean McVey, to his credit, he's always been extremely critical about his previous coaching job in the Super Bowl loss to the Patriots. He doesn't shy away from it. He acknowledges, listen, I came up short. Not to say that he was the only one at fault, but to his credit, he takes responsibility for that vaunted offense being held to just 3 points. But when I look at Sean McVay, Ryan, this is a guy who is still just 36 years old. He got the head coaching job at 31. This is his second trip to the Super Bowl in about 5 years. I believe he has the highest winning percentage among active NFL coaches. What would a win mean for his legacy early on in his career if he's able to do it?
Oh, man. That's a great question, too. We were actually talking on Monday on Radio Row about, our top coaches in the NFL and where they stand. And I already think McVay is top 5 when you look at just in 5 years, 5 winning seasons, 4 trips to the playoffs, 2 trips to the Super Bowl. I don't know how you get a whole lot better than that, but obviously winning the big game on Sunday does that. And so that might even scoot him up into that top 2, top 3 range because if you look at who you put up there, obviously, I think you have Belichick 1, you have Andy Reid in there, but Andy Reid only has 1 win. You have John Harbaugh maybe in there. Again, only 1 win. Mike Tomlin in there. Again, I think he has 1 or 2 wins. So I think McVay in such a short time, what he's built, the culture he's built, you look at his, coaching tree already. He was asked that on Monday, and he doesn't call it his coaching tree. He says he's too young for that. He called it just colleagues that have now gone on and done bigger and better things, and he was happy to be a part of that process. Which is always a good, humble answer, I think. But you look at all the coaches around the league that have come from his coaching circle, and it's, the legacy is already great, but now you put the stamp on it with the Super Bowl win, and it just grows bigger and bigger. And then it's like, all right, how many can we start stacking up? Because that's the last thing, and maybe you're going to get to this, Jonah, but everyone talked about this year being an all-in year. But on paper, they're the youngest team in the NFL, which I don't think a lot of people know, by age. All their stars, Stafford's still locked in for another year. Jalen Ramsey's locked in. Aaron Donald's locked in. Cooper Kupp's locked in. Robert Woods locked in. And then if they're able to get OBJ or Von Miller to come back, you run it back with the same team. So it's not like it's like they're losing everyone this year with the mass exodus. So McVay, great legacy already. Super Bowl adds to that, and then you can just start stacking it from here on out, I think.
And there's so many different parts to the Rams that have made them so successful, and we don't necessarily need to rehash all of the common answers, but given the fact that you followed this team a lot more closely than most people, what do you think in your mind is perhaps one of the least talked about or under-discussed reasons behind the Rams' success this particular season?
Yeah, I'll give you 2. One is probably not super under talked about. I think it gets mentioned, but I think culture is so huge. The Rams have such a great culture. Von Miller's talked about that extensively. Came from the Broncos, who he still loves. I mean, this week he even said he didn't want to leave Denver. He still thinks of himself as a Bronco. He's just working in LA. But he piggybacked that. He wasn't saying anything bad about LA. He said, but coming here, the culture is so great. It's such a winning culture that they've built that you just buy into it immediately. And so any player you are around the league, they want to play here in LA now. Like, they know what McVey and Les Snead and the captains of this team, Aaron Donald and now Matthew Stafford, have built. And so not only is it a destination city-wise, but culture and organizationally, it's become a spot where people want to come. And we could see Vaughn and OBJ take less money to come back because of that culture. So I think that's one. Two is health. I mean, I talk a lot about on my show, when you look at the top teams at the end of the year, it's the healthiest teams. I mean, everyone likes to say that you don't want to make excuses about health and, next minute mentality, but the teams that go to the Super Bowl are the teams that are healthy all year long. And I think throughout McVay's tenure, overall, obviously you've had some, but overall they've been a very healthy team, and that credit, some of it's luck, obviously, but I think a lot more of it is to his coaching style, his regiment during practices, his training camp regiment. I mean, he became famous right off the bat as a young coach when he didn't play any starters in the preseason. If you remember 5 years ago, that was unheard of. Now a lot of teams are doing that because they're like, oh, this Rams team stays healthy all year. So I think the injury thing has been huge for this team because they have their star players at the right time. And obviously they had some injuries at the playoffs. And now, Jonah, for the Super Bowl, they're the healthiest they've been all year. I mean, they'll have pretty much everyone back, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's certainly something that isn't talked about enough, and we've seen it across every other kind of professional sports league, how important injuries play in the outcome. We saw it just last year in the NBA, and really you can say same thing with baseball. Football injuries play a factor. So you mentioned the Super Bowl, so let's stick with that matchup. Obviously, it's the Rams and the Bengals at SoFi. By the way, have you been to SoFi Stadium yet this year?
I have been to 3 Rams games and 1 Chargers game. So it's a beautiful stadium. It's unreal.
Okay, so I was going to say it's a beautiful stadium. I went to the Rams Seahawks regular season game. It was just outstanding. So we obviously know that the Rams, they're favored in this game. There's so many advantages that they have over the Bengals, especially when it comes to their defensive line going up against that Bengals offensive line, just to name one. But when you look at Cincinnati, what kind of advantage do you think that they have in this matchup, or where do you think that they can kind of pose some problems for this Rams team on Sunday?
Yeah, you look at the matchups across the board, and I think a lot of it's actually fairly even. Like, you look at quarterback, you look at running backs, and the advantage, and I'm not saying this position group versus the Rams' same position group, but just versus the Rams' defensive group would be the receivers on the back. I mean, you talk about Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. You obviously have Jalen Ramsey out there, but Darius Williams has been very up and down. David Long Jr. has been very up and down. Deontay Dion has had the spell start. He was a practice squad guy his entire career. And then they're hoping they get Robert Rochelle back for this game, but he's a rookie, 4th-round pick out of a small school. So it's outside of Jalen Ramsey, that secondary has a tall task to slow down these big 3 strong, fast, athletic receivers. And so I think that's the kind of biggest mismatch, where the best way for the Rams to counter that, honestly, is with the pass rush. And, we saw against the Tennessee Titans, Joe Burrow goes down 9 times. And if Ryan Tannehill doesn't turn the ball over 3 times, the Titans should have won that game. It wasn't. Keep getting phone calls coming in. Sorry about that, Jonah. But Joe Burrow is great. I don't want to take anything away from him. But in that game against Tennessee, I mean, they essentially won because Ryan Tannehill turned it over 3 times. So if the Rams pass rush can get to him, they can really neutralize those receivers that are just so good and so dynamic that it's going to be tough to slow them down. And the way you do that is with Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd, and Von Miller. So definitely the biggest thing to watch for in this one on the Bengals side is those 3 receivers and how they're able to slow it down.
And again, for any viewers or listeners, apologies. We got Ryan on the road here. He's pulling off triple duty on the way to Radio Row. Again, appreciate you stopping by. So I think for me, Ryan, I think a big X factor in this game is going to be Joe Mixon. Because as you've talked about, there are a lot of even matchups from a talent perspective, but Joe Mixon is the one guy when I look at Cincinnati and I say he's capable of busting open this Rams defense, who surprisingly was really good against the 49ers, against their run attack, but they can be exploited against the right back, and obviously he's great making catches out of the backfield. When you look at this matchup, is there one guy or a coach or a unit that you say is going to be the X factor? Do you have someone like that?
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of mentioned, I think the pass rush is the main X factor. But talking specifically to Joe Mixon, I would say that, you look at this linebacking core and a guy like Ernest Jones, who rookie out of South Carolina, has had a really good rookie year when he came in after the Rams traded Kenny Young, got injured, missed the beginning of the playoffs, was back for that Niners game. So he was a big help in slowing down that run, even though he didn't even play every snap. He was kind of rotated in and out. But he should be a full go. And so he's a guy that they brought in and drafted specifically to stop the run, because that was his forte in college, just kind of being that GPS nose to the football. And so if you're talking specifically of Joe Mixon, how to slow him down, obviously guys like A'Shawn Robinson and Greg Gaines who plug the holes up front. But when you look at the second level, it's going to have to be a guy like Ernest Jones, really stepping up. And then Troy Reeder, who's struggled a lot, and specifically in tackling. I mean, the guy loves to just jump on backs and let guys carry him. So him tackling low, form tackling, and maybe taking guys down would be a huge help too.
I love. Yeah, Troy Reeder. He's one of those guys where you have to love his passion, but I think he single-handedly nearly lost the game for the Rams on like two different critical third downs. He couldn't bring down Debo. He couldn't bring down Jennings, and those are hard guys to bring down. But I remember I tweeted, Ryan, man, if Troy Reeder just makes a play here, we're probably getting the football back. Okay, let's switch to USC. I just want to ask you one question about the Trojans, because I know all the talks about the Rams, but I can't go a whole 15 minutes with you without mentioning USC and Lincoln Riley. And to me, I'll be the first to admit I've always been a huge UCLA fan. I'm a big UCLA guy, but I'd be lying if I said that what really attracted and gravitated me to college football was Reggie Bush and USC when I grew up, because he was the most just scintillating college football player that I'd ever seen. I couldn't take my eyes off him. And when USC was really good, LA was buzzing in a way that we haven't seen in quite some time when it comes to college football. And I think that is starting to be restored. And obviously the job that Lincoln Riley has already been doing, I can think proves he's already been a home run hire. But in your mind, it's kind of a two-part question, Ryan. First, are you at all surprised by how quickly he's been turning things around? And second, can you see USC competing for a national championship next season? I know people are talking about 2 or 3 years down the road, but can you see it happening even as quickly as next year?
Yeah, it's Lincoln Riley was on Radio Row yesterday, and you could just see the aura he carried around him as he cruised around the row, and what he's brought back to the city in terms of USC football in such a short time is phenomenal. I mean, they were kind of forgotten about it, a forgotten sports team almost for the last 2-3 seasons, and now there's just so much excitement surrounding him, and he's done that in a month and a half, 2 months. So it's been really crazy to me to see how quickly he's been able to turn things around with these transfers. Obviously, we know with the new transfer portal rules, a lot of teams have that. That's been Chip Kelly's kind of MO with UCLA in general. You being a UCLA fan know that. So we knew there would be a chance of that happening. I didn't think he'd get as many as he did. But then we also saw recruits that originally were committed to USC and then decommitted and now coming back, basically saying they believe in the program again, believe in what he's going to bring here, believe in how he's going to prepare them for the NFL. And so I think it's a combination of what he's done at Oklahoma, what he's done, getting to the college football playoff there, and also just his football acumen and IQ and what he's done with quarterbacks, which I think is the big reason why Caleb Williams, took a long time to make that decision. And a lot of us out here that cover the team think it was maybe he felt slighted that Lincoln Riley recruited into Oklahoma and then left. But I think when it comes down to it, he realized that was the best guy to prepare him for the draft, which is big on his family. His dad always said, I'm not really that worried about national championships. I'm worried about going to the NFL. So, but if we can get a natty on the way, that's best of both worlds. So to answer your second question, I think they can definitely compete. I think they'll for sure compete for a Pac-12 title. I think they are truly a year away from a true national title run. I think they need to get better in the trenches. They need to get there. Obviously, we still need to see them get improved dramatically defensively. I think the offense is going to be really fun. When you get, the Williams both coming over, you get Raleek Brown committing, you get the Travis Dye, you get the kid from Stanford also transferring. They got all the skill positions set. But defensively, they were abysmal last year, and that doesn't just turn around overnight. So until the defense is substantially better, I think that's what it's going to take to compete truly for a title with the SEC and with the Big Ten and the Big 12. But I think they'll for sure be competing for the Pac-12 this first year. And hey, if they get a shot and make a run, you never know. All bets are off. You can get to that Final Four, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, listen, first of all, are you going to be at SoFi for the Super Bowl, or where are you watching the game?
So, yeah, we are at Radio Row all week at the Convention Center, but Sunday we're actually doing a LAFB watch party at a brewery called Surfridge Brewery in El Segundo. So if you don't got any plans, Jonah, you got to cruise through. A bunch of the Rams fans going to be there just hanging out. Free event. Should be fun.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining me again. This was the founder, CEO of the LA Football Network. Make sure to check him out on YouTube, on Twitter, the LA Football Show with Ryan Dyrud and Frosty Rucker. Ryan, thank you so much as always, and drive safe. All right, get to your location, your destination safely. All right, appreciate you taking some time.
Hey, brother, always appreciate you. Thanks for reaching out. Sorry again about the driving out in studio and the connection issues, but I appreciate you. All right, have a good rest of your show.
Thank you so much. All right, that is Ryan Dyrud. So happy to have him join me. Honestly, does really great work, and I would encourage everyone to check out LA Football Network, hosted by Ryan Dyrud on Twitter and on YouTube. By the way, right before my Malkin's moments, I want to give a special shout out to one of my good friends. She's a really, really talented musician, Ali Angel. She just came out with a really, really good song, I Am a Ram, and it perfectly got released this week, perfectly aligns with the Super Bowl that is going to be taking place between the Rams and the Bengals this Sunday. I would encourage everyone to go check it out on Spotify. Again, Ali Angel. It's called I Am a Ram. And she's got a TikTok video. We're trying to reach out to the LA Rams to get them to make the song its anthem song. And I'll just encourage everyone to go check it out, support her music. It's really, really good, but especially this song in particular, we're trying to spread the word, and I wanted to give her a big shout out on Morning Joe. So finally, my final topic, my Malkin's moments. Have some great Malkin's moments for you. And again, I know I'm going a couple minutes over what I usually go, but so far, obviously, with the Beijing Olympics, the Winter Olympics have been taking place, so there are a lot of people to talk about, but I have to first give a shout out to the U.S. team for winning its first ever silver medal in the figure skating team event. Russia took gold, Japan took bronze. Nathan Chen was just a fantastic figure skater. I never really known too much about him, but the American has been fantastic. Not to mention some of the other figure skaters as well have just been really good, both the men's and the women's, but I want to give a shout out to him in particular. So shout out to the U.S. team for taking silver. I'm going to come back to the Beijing Olympics, but I do want to give a couple other shout outs to Arkansas, knocking off the top-ranked Auburn Tigers yesterday in college basketball on the men's side. They knocked off the number one team in the country, 80-76 in overtime. And by the way, it was Arkansas's first win over an AP number one ranked team since 1984 against the North Carolina Tar Heels. And yes, you could guess that featured Michael Jordan. Dean Smith was the head coach. And here's the interesting thing. Arkansas, according to ESPN stats information, they've won 12 of its 20 home games against AP top 5 teams in the AP poll era. So that's since 1948 to the 1949 season. That's the second best winning percentage of any program behind only Kentucky. So big shout out to Arkansas. Greg Popovich on Saturday became the first NBA head coach to win 1,500 games in the NBA, both regular season and playoff games. He made history after the San Antonio Spurs win over the Houston Rockets. He's obviously been the head coach with the San Antonio Spurs since, I believe, 1996. People wouldn't know that Greg Popovich was actually the head coach of a lot of teams in Southern California as well. So before that, but obviously it hasn't been a season that the Spurs have won. They're 20-34 record, 12th in the Western Conference. DeJounte Murray, however, was just recently named an All-Star in the Western Conference, so shout out to him. But going back to the Winter Olympics, Petra Vlhova won the women's slalom at the Beijing Olympics to give Slovakia its first gold medal ever for alpine skiing. First gold medal ever. She's 26 years old. Unfortunately, more of the headlines in the U.S. have been around Michaela Shiffrin, who failed to even qualify for the second race because she didn't finish in consecutive races, unfortunately. But for Vlhova, she's already clinched the World Cup title in this discipline. She was only the 8th fastest after the first run down. It was called the Ice River course, but she made up for it with an unofficial combined time of 1 minute 44.98 seconds. Now, going to snowboarding, I'm still rooting for Shaun White. Record-setting 5th Olympics for him. He still looks great. The guy, he finished 19th at the event, but there's still time for him to make a push. Shout out to Eileen Gu, who won the gold medal for the Big Air free skiing event. This might be the wildest event that they have at the Beijing Olympics. I'm not going to lie. You're just standing on basically an alpine, but it just looks like a roller coaster, just a straight slope down. You're just skiing, and then you go off one big mogul and you try to go execute some ridiculous backflip turns, 360, clutching onto the skis and land going backwards about 40 feet in the air. It is absolutely ridiculous. Huge shout out to her. I was watching that surprisingly live. It was fantastic. And here's the big shout out to Natalie Geisenberger, who won the women's luge competition, the gold medal for the 3rd time at the Beijing Winter Olympics. She's of German descent. She became the first to win the Olympic women's competition for luge 3 times to cement her place in history as the best of all time. Literally is the sport's best. Took her 3 minutes and 53.454 seconds. No woman has more Olympic gold medals. No woman has more World Championship gold medals. No woman has more World Cup race wins. She has 52 World Cup victories, which is exactly the number that the rest of the women in this Olympic field have combined. It's absolutely astonishing. She actually joins, funny enough, another great German legend in George Hackl, the men's champion in 1992, 1994, and 1998, as the only luge athlete to win 3 consecutive gold medals in the same event. Not to mention, she just gave birth to her son, Leo, during this Olympic cycle, and yet she's back out and competing well. That's all the time that I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin. Follow me on Twitter, Jonah Malkin, at morning_Joe_. Follow me on Instagram, JMalkin97, TikTok, Jonah Malkin. As always, have a lovely rest of your morning.